Ever wondered what it really felt like to sleep inside a medieval castle on the coldest night of the year? Not the fairy tale version, the real one. No heating, no glass windows, just stone, wind, and maybe the sound of rats in the dark. Hey friends, tonight we're stepping way back in time. You're standing outside a towering 14th century fortress. Snow spirals from a pewter sky. Your boots crunch on frozen gravel, and your breath curls into little white clouds. Your fingers are already numb. Your nose is raw red. And the wind? It cuts like a knife. Honestly, your odds of making it through this night without catching the medieval flu? Not great. But you're here. And inside that hulking stone beast, an entire world is waiting. Before we step inside, if you enjoy calming history stories that help you wind down and drift off, tap like, subscribe if it feels right, and drop your country and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft nighttime hum. And get ready. You're about to spend one long, icy night inside a medieval castle. The castle gates creak open slowly, groaning like they've got a hangover. Chains rattle. Iron grinds against iron. The drawbridge, crusted with frost, sags beneath your weight as you cross the moat. Thankfully frozen solid, or we'd be adding hypothermia to your list of worries. Inside the portcullis, 2 guards in patchy wool cloaks eye you with the suspicious boredom of men who've stood in the cold for too many hours and haven't been paid in weeks. They say nothing. One scratches his beard. You shuffle past. The air changes instantly, from the raw bite of winter to something warmer, if not exactly pleasant. Smoke, wet dog, baked turnip, and burning wood swirl around you like a medieval Yankee candle. Limited edition. Peasant hearth. And you're in. Just like that. The bailey is bustling. A farrier hammers at a horseshoe near the stables. A washerwoman wrings out shirts that probably haven't been washed since last harvest. 2 children chase each other in circles with sticks, and one is definitely winning. You don't have long to look around because you're ushered forward through another doorway, through a veil of musty wool curtains, into the castle's true heart, the Great Hall. It hits you in waves, heat from multiple fires, laughter, shouting, dogs barking, meat roasting on a spit so big it takes 2 kitchen boys to turn it. A minstrel strumming something vaguely melodic on a lute that's seen better days. Wooden trestle tables stretch the length of the hall, each laden with trenchers, those flat hunks of stale bread used as plates. Nobles huddle near the hearth, cloaks draped elegantly over their shoulders like dramatic birds. Their cheeks glow with drink, their voices rise in gossip. Did you hear about Lord Brennet's daughter and the stable boy? Someone whispers far too loudly. You move toward the fire, drawn like a moth. It's not just for warmth, it's for survival. The stones of the castle suck heat from your bones, and every inch of exposed skin tingles with cold. You stretch your hands toward the flames, which crackle in welcome, and finally, you start to thaw, but not too fast. Remember, you're wearing about 4 layers of scratchy wool, a leather belt, and probably some poorly tanned boots that smell like a wet fox. Comfort is a concept not yet invented. As your eyes adjust to the flickering light, you start to pick out more details. High on the walls, tapestries flap ever so slightly from a sneaky draft no one can quite find. They're meant to trap heat and show off wealth. Hunting scenes, biblical battles, and one that might just be a unicorn vomiting. It's hard to tell. You edge past a dog licking something unidentifiable off the floor. Someone tries to offer you ale, but it's lukewarm and bitter enough to count as punishment. A little boy sneezes directly onto a wooden spoon and returns it to the serving platter. You blink. No one else seems to mind. Here's your first official medieval fun fact. Castles were rarely the pristine fortresses Hollywood loves. Most were damp, smoky, crowded, and loud. You think your neighbor's bass speaker is annoying? Try living above a pigsty while 30 people snore and one guy plays the hurdy-gurdy until 2 a.m. And your quirky tidbit. Nobles used to warm their hands and feet in a communal brazier, and then warm other things too. It got weird. You sidestep a brazier just in case. Historians still argue whether these great halls were mainly for communal living or controlled spectacle, where the lord could flex wealth and power, even when the bread was stale and the wine a bit vinegary. Either way, the atmosphere is half feast, half carefully managed chaos. You're part of the scenery now. Another shadow flickering in firelight. Another pair of feet shuffling over rush-covered floors are not just there for decoration. They soak up spills, mask smells, and house more insects than you care to count. With every step, something crunches. Hopefully straw. Maybe beetle. Don't ask. Someone toasts you with a leg of goose. You raise your hand awkwardly. A juggler drops an apple on your head. Laughter erupts. You smile and nod, because what else can you do? It's loud, messy, and somehow beautiful. The fire crackles. Shadows dance. A woman laughs like she's never had a care in the world. A drunk knight tries to sit down on a bench that isn't there. He falls. The dog steals his meat. Life goes on. And above it all, high in the rafters, an owl perches silently, feathers puffed against the cold. It watches. It waits. Probably judging you. The sky outside has deepened to indigo. The wind still howls against the walls, but inside, surrounded by flickering light and half-frozen merriment, you're part of something ancient and oddly comforting. At least, until someone tells you it's your turn to check the servant quarters. You're not entirely sure how it happened. Maybe someone mistook you for a steward. Or maybe they just didn't want to go down there. But suddenly, you're being led out of the glowing warmth of the great hall and down a narrow, twisting stone passage. The air cools rapidly, like you're descending into the throat of some great, sleeping beast. Torches flicker as you pass, their flames coughing smoke that clings to the damp walls. Somewhere ahead, a door creaks. Behind you, the laughter and music from the hall fade into a kind of damp, echoing silence. Welcome to the Undercroft. It smells exactly like you feared. Wet wool, soot, and something distressingly mushroomy. The floor is uneven and cold underfoot. Stone slabs slick with moisture, and straw that's doing its best to pretend it's still useful insulation. You're now in the servants' domain, the backstage of the castle's grand production. And it's chaos, but a very quiet kind of chaos. Hushed voices, hurried footsteps, the occasional curse muttered into a sleeve. A boy runs past carrying a chamber pot. You step aside just in time, only to nearly collide with a girl carrying 2 loaves of bread and a bucket of what might be stew. She nods politely, doesn't stop. No one stops. There's no applause here, no feasting, no goblets raised in your honor. This is the engine room of medieval life. And tonight, it's creaking along on raw determination and overworked ankles. You find yourself in a low-ceilinged corridor, the walls close enough to brush your shoulders. Doors line both sides, most ajar. Inside, pallets of straw, blankets of rough-spun wool, cloaks hung from nails, and the faintest suggestion of privacy. A single candle might light each room, if they're lucky. More likely, there's just a dying ember in a corner brazier, guarded like treasure. A few servants glance up as you pass. One is rubbing her feet with pig fat to keep them from cracking in the cold. Another's whispering a prayer over a small wooden charm, some local saint of warmth and good sleep, probably invented last week. You pass two boys using each other as pillows, snoring in perfect rhythm. The cold makes them curl like kittens. Here's your official historical fact. Medieval servants worked long hours for almost no pay, and were often children or teens. Entire families might live and serve within the castle walls. Some never once setting foot outside during winter. Their lives were structured by the bells of the chapel, not the whims of the clock. Because clocks, if they existed at all, belonged to the bishop or the astronomer. Now, for your fringe tidbit, some wealthier castles kept warming stones, flat slabs of rock heated in the kitchen fires and wrapped in cloth to serve as medieval hot water bottles. You spot one now. A servant tucks it beside an old woman wrapped in wool like a human onion. She blinks at you, smiles faintly, then closes her eyes again, probably dreaming of July. Historians still argue whether castle servants were more exploited or more secure than peasants in villages. Sure, life here meant backbreaking work, but there was food, sometimes, shelter, drafty, and protection, assuming you didn't insult the cook or fall down a well. It's a grim kind of security, but compared to starving on the outside, you get why people stayed. Someone hisses your name. Well, not your name, but something close. You turn to see a wiry young man beckoning from a side tunnel. Kitchen stores, he mutters, and you're swept into a new maze of passageways lined with crates, barrels, and shelves stacked with, let's be generous and call it food. Onions and nets, dried fish like curled parchment, apples stored in straw, a barrel of something labeled ale, but smelling of vinegar and feet. Behind one door, a goat bleats angrily. You pull your cloak tighter. A girl throws a cloth over a wheel of cheese so moldy it looks like it could walk out on its own. She gives you a look that says, "Don't even ask." Still, this is where the quiet power lies. Servants control the food, the fires, the linens, the gossip. Nothing in the castle happens without them. There's a rhythm here. Chopping, hauling, washing, scrubbing. Feet patter, doors groan, buckets clank. No one is ever truly still, except the sleeping. And even they twitch with dreams of duties undone. You duck under a low arch and find yourself in a laundry area. A woman is pouring hot water into a tub and scrubbing something so aggressively you suspect personal revenge is involved. Nearby, shirts steam on a line strung over the coals, and someone curses as they burn a sock on a hook. Another turn. Another room. You step through a doorway and almost trip over a sack of turnips. The room is silent, except for the rhythmic chop-chop of someone cutting roots by the hearth. You notice now how the walls glisten with condensation. Every breath makes a cloud. The stone presses in. There are no windows, just the endless flicker of firelight against damp walls. You finally pause beside a narrow window slit, the only one you've seen for a while. It's just wide enough to let in the chill. You rest your hand on the stone ledge, slick and icy, and look out into the darkness. Snow still falls, blanketing the courtyard in soft white. Up above, warm golden light glows from the great hall. You realize something. While the nobles toast and feast and laugh at the jester's jokes, this world below is the foundation. Cold, cramped, and unsung, but it holds the castle up. A bell chimes faintly from the chapel tower. Midnight, maybe. Someone calls out orders in a clipped voice. Footsteps scatter. The stew girl from earlier passes you again. No bucket this time, just tired eyes and cracked hands. You give her a nod. She nods back. Nothing grand. But in this place, in this hour, that nod means, I see you. I'm surviving too. You climb again. Not far, but far enough for your legs to protest after the long chill of the undercroft. The stairwell is narrow, uneven, and spirals tighter than seems reasonable, as if it was designed by someone who hated both knees and logic. Every stone step is worn in the middle, curved by centuries of footfall. Cold clings to the walls here like damp silk, and somewhere above, a draft winds through the slit of a high arrow loop. You reach a wooden landing and glance up. The stair splits. A stone passage leading upward to noble chambers, and another, rougher corridor disappearing sideways into servant territory. You follow the side route. The corridor groans under your boots, its planks warped and creaky, though it smells faintly of baked bread and something medicinal. There's a wooden door ahead. It's half open. Inside is a chamber, modest, but not squalid. A straw-stuffed mattress lies in the corner under a threadbare wool blanket. A rushlight flickers weakly beside a chipped basin. A pair of boots, probably the servant's best and only pair, rests neatly at the foot of the bed. You notice a small scrap of parchment pinned to the wall with a splinter of wood. Someone's drawn a crude animal, maybe a dog, maybe a pig. It's oddly touching. You leave quietly and continue down the hallway. A sudden sneeze erupts from behind a door. Then a muffled curse. Then silence. You pause, then tiptoe on, because medieval manners are basically don't ask, don't open, don't get sneezed on. Eventually, the corridor leads you to a narrow wooden staircase. This one creaks louder than your last three thoughts combined. You ascend cautiously, hands skimming the rough wall, until you reach the upper floor, where nobility resides. Here, the mood shifts. Gone is the earthy scent of sweat and stone. Here, it smells of dried lavender, aged linen, and somehow, roast goose, even though it's hours since dinner. Tapestries line the walls, hiding drafty gaps and showing off dynastic pride. Coats of arms, faded battles, lions that look suspiciously like goats. The torches are fewer, but the silence here is deeper, thicker. It's like walking through someone's dream. You approach a carved wooden door. A snore rolls out from within, deep, steady, and punctuated by the occasional snort. Through a crack in the wood, you see the outline of a grand bed, curtains drawn, a chamber pot beside it. A candle flickers, casting lazy shadows across the tapestries. You don't linger. Some things are best left undisturbed. But you do peek into the next room. This one is quieter. The fire's embers glow low in the grate. A young woman lies curled in bed, half buried under furs, her hand tucked beneath her cheek. On a nearby table, a silver goblet, a string of beads, and an open book. Latin, of course. Probably a psalter or bestiary. Here's your The pages ripple for this floor. Nobility slept in separate chambers when they could. Beds were prized possessions, often passed down like family jewels. The feather-stuffed mattresses, carved canopy frames, and heavy curtains all served one purpose: stay warm, stay alive. Castles in winter were cold enough to freeze ink in the inkwell. And your fringe detail of the night. It wasn't uncommon for nobles to keep small dogs under the covers to act as personal heaters. Little furry radiators named things like La Pomme or Sir Buttons. You can hear one now, snoring softly from somewhere under the bed. A true knight. Historians still argue whether noble life was all luxury or simply a different flavor of hardship. Sure, they had better food, better clothes, and weren't scrubbing cauldrons, but they were also tangled in politics, arranged marriages, land disputes, and the constant paranoia of poisoning. Imagine never being able to enjoy soup in peace. You continue through the upper chambers, each one revealing its own quiet life. One holds a widow wrapped in black, whispering prayers to a saint whose name you've never heard. Another room belongs to two brothers, teenagers, asleep head to toe, their swords leaning nearby like loyal dogs. You even pass what looks like a study, though the ink is frozen solid in its pot and the quills are bristling with frost. A lone candle melts slowly beside a map of the local fiefdom, its edges curled and cracked. And then, one last room. You open the door gently. A fire still burns here. A man, likely a minor lord or steward, sits in a heavy chair, eyes half closed, feet propped up near the hearth. He doesn't startle when you enter. He only says, "Cold night for ghosts," and takes a sip of something from a pewter flask. You nod politely, not sure what to say. He smiles faintly, like someone used to seeing shadows. "You heading up to the wall?" he asks, gesturing toward another narrow stairwell nearby. "Better bundle up. She bites harder up there." You thank him quietly and step out, letting the door click shut behind you. The hallway, now, is utterly still. It's a strange feeling, walking between the world of firelit nobles and the distant wind howling above. You're not quite one of them, not quite one of the servants. You're something else tonight. A guest, a ghost, a witness. And as your hand rests on the icy stone banister of the next stairwell, and your breath curls white in the dark, you take one last look back down the hallway. The doors are closed. The rooms are quiet. The firelight flickers. And upstairs, winter waits. The stone under your boots turns from uneven to treacherous as you climb higher. Your fingertips brush the icy wall for balance. Its chill cuts deeper than before, like it's soaked straight into the rock. Each breath fogs the air in front of you, swirling with the hush of night and the slow whisper of rising wind. Your body protests, stiff from the cold and weariness, but you push onward. Because, up there, above all the feasting and the sleeping, someone still has to keep watch. You reach the top stair. The final wooden door creaks open with a groan that feels far too loud in the sleeping castle. You're greeted by a blast of wind so sharp it instantly pierces your cloak, your tunic, and maybe your soul. Welcome to the battlements. It's not exactly cozy. The wall walk stretches along the outer rim of the keep, narrow and exposed, with only a knee-high crenellation to shield you from the swirling dark. The sky above is clear and star-smeared. The snow has stopped, but not the cold. The kind of cold that presses behind your eyes and makes your teeth ache. Even your eyelashes feel stiff. A guard hunches beside a brazier, poking it with a half-hearted iron rod. His breath fogs as he glances over. "You lost?" he grunts, without much curiosity. He's swaddled in so many layers of wool and leather that he resembles a bundled turnip. You shake your head. He shrugs and scoots aside. You take your place beside him. From here, the castle sprawls below like a stone maze under a silver moon. The roofs glitter with frost. Torches flicker faintly in the windows. The moat glints like obsidian. And beyond the walls, nothing. Just frozen hills and woods thick with shadow. Somewhere far off, a wolf howls. Because of course it does. Here's your historical fact, while you shiver. Night watch on the battlements was a serious duty. Guards rotated shifts through the coldest hours, scanning for bandits, fire, or enemies approaching under cover of dark. Falling asleep was grounds for punishment, sometimes death. The stakes? Protect the entire household from disaster. No pressure. A gust lifts your hood and slaps your face. The wind up here has Some medieval guards believed hanging dried wolf tongues on the parapet could ward off evil spirits and bad luck. Others swore by owl feathers in their boots. You glance over. Your fellow guard has something tucked into his boot. Hard to tell what. Possibly a sandwich. "Nothing ever happens," he mutters, rubbing his hands. "Except when it does, and then it's all fire and screaming." Comforting. Historians still argue whether these long night watches were primarily defensive, or more about enforcing fear and discipline among the castle's own people. Some believe they doubled as quiet surveillance, keeping an eye on what the noble family might be plotting behind closed doors. After all, information was just as powerful as a sharp sword. You begin your slow patrol, boots crunching over the rimed stone. Every few yards there's another brazier, another guard, most half asleep, nodding or staring blankly into the dark, like they've been cursed with eternal boredom. A few murmur greetings. One offers you a scrap of dried meat, which you accept gratefully, even though it tastes like shoe. You pause at the northeast turret. From here, you can see the village below. Just faint dots of orange and red scattered in the valley. Most of the peasants are asleep in their timber-framed homes, likely curled up with their animals for warmth. A few chimneys still puff faint trails of smoke. It hits you then, how quiet it is. Not silent exactly, but still. A kind of stillness that hums through your bones. No carts, no voices, just wind, the occasional owl, and the distant creak of old wood settling. You press your hands to the stone, feeling its cold pulse beneath your gloves. These walls have seen everything. Raids, coronations, weddings, betrayals. Tonight, they see you. Just another figure walking slowly along their spine, trying to keep the cold at bay. As you turn back toward the stairwell, something clatters behind you. You spin, heart quick, breath caught. A flag snaps loose in the wind. Nothing more, but your pulse thunders like a war drum. Maybe it's the cold. Or maybe this castle, old and heavy with memory, knows how to play with your nerves. Back at the brazier, the other guard is humming now. A tuneless lullaby, probably passed down from some grandmother with 6 teeth and 17 children. "Warm wine later," he says, if the steward's in a generous mood. You nod, not trusting your lips to form words. Your face is mostly frozen. He leans toward you, voice low. "Ever seen a ghost up here?" You blink. He grins. "Me neither. but someone swears they saw Lord Edgar's headless dog trotting the walls last winter, wagging its tail. And there's your third joke of the night, delivered with a wink and a generous helping of frostbite. You stay another hour. Then, quietly, you descend. Your limbs ache. Your toes feel like stone. But the fires below promise warmth. Maybe bread. Maybe even the good ale, if you're lucky. As you step through the wooden door and leave the cold behind, you glance back once more. Above, the stars wheel slowly. The wind keeps singing. And the walls, ancient, watchful, never sleep. The heat from the lower levels hits you like a sleepy, bread-scented wave. After the battlements, even this lukewarm air feels like stepping into a tavern bathhouse, which, you'll be pleased to know, usually included stew-like communal water and one very confused chicken. You descend deeper this time, not down into the frigid servant tunnels, but toward the castle's kitchen. It takes you through another tight corridor that smells of old grease, roasted onions, and something sweet. Or rotten. Hard to say. The walls narrow as you turn a corner, duck under a beam, and suddenly find yourself in a different kind of world altogether. The kitchen's after dark. It's smaller than you imagined, but no less busy. A fire still glows in the great hearth, the coals red and flickering, casting long shadows of kettles and hanging ladles against soot-stained stone. The warmth is delicious. You can feel your limbs begin to defrost like yesterday's pottage. Two cooks remain awake, bundled in aprons that may have once been white. One stirs a thick pot suspended over the fire. The other sharpens a blade slowly, rhythmically. Shk, shk. Like he's either preparing for breakfast or a very quiet murder. Neither looks up when you enter. You step carefully past barrels of dried peas, sacks of flour, and jars of pickled something or other. One lid is askew. You peek. Eels. Sleeping, coiled, pickled eels. Of course. Here's your historical fact. The medieval kitchen was the center of castle life, often larger and more complex than people imagine. Feeding an entire household, nobles, knights, servants, guests, and random freeloading cousins, was a daily challenge involving strict routines, seasonal ingredients, and massive open hearths. Even now, long past dinner, the remnants of that effort cooling on a rack. A wheel of cheese sits suspiciously close to the fire, like it might melt into escape. A small dog sniffs near a spilled bucket of stock, but the sharpening cook shoos it away with a quick tst. You find a stool near the hearth, rubbing your hands together as the fire warms your face. Across the room, the stirring cook finally speaks. "Stew," he says, without looking up. "Root vegetables. Goat. Maybe parsnip. Not sure. Been going since midday." You nod solemnly. At this hour, that stew is a holy thing. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some castles had designated night kitchens, or secret hearths kept warm through the dark hours, used only for late-night snacks and medicinal teas. One old tale insists a lady once demanded a fig tart at 3 a.m, and her steward jumped from a window in protest. Possibly apocryphal. Possibly very relatable. Historians still argue whether medieval food was flavorful or foul. Spices like cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg were treasured and did show up in wealthier households. But even the best cook can't do miracles with salted fish and 6-day-old onions. Recipes varied wildly. You might get a delicious spiced pie, or a gray lump politely described as chewable. Someone sneezes behind you. You spin and nearly trip over a kitchen boy asleep beneath a table. He's wrapped in a flour sack, breathing softly, clutching a turnip like it's a teddy bear. You blink. No one comments. Time moves differently here. There's no clock, just instinct. The cooks shuffle around each other like ghosts, fetching herbs from dark shelves, mumbling about how the garlic's gone to sleep, and debating whether the honey keg has been tampered with again. Spoiler, it has. By bees. You lean against the warm stone of the oven and let yourself watch. The kitchen is alive, even in its quietest hour. Steam rises from the pot in slow spirals. Iron pans sway gently from their hooks. A lone onion rolls off a shelf with the resignation of someone late for work. Someone sings under their breath, low, wordless. Not cheerful, but steady. It's easy to imagine this kitchen during the day. Hot, noisy, frantic. But now, in the hush of night, it feels like the heart of the castle, beating slowly, steadily, smelling faintly of meat, cloves, and wood smoke. The cook ladles some stew into a chipped wooden bowl and offers it with a grunt. You accept it like it's a treasure, which it is. It tastes exactly like winter. Thick, earthy, oddly sweet. You can't name half the vegetables in it, and there might be bone, but it's hot, and it settles in your belly like a warming stone. As you eat, you catch sight of a side room. Just an open doorway, really. Inside, racks of cured meat hang like sleeping bats, shadows cast by the flickering firelight. A cat sits watching you from the top shelf, its eyes like coins. You nod to it. It doesn't nod back. Rude. The sharpening cook wipes his blade on a cloth and yawns. That stew will last till dawn, he says, or until the dog gets it. You finish the last bite and return the bowl with a quiet thank you. He grunts again, this time with approval, maybe. Hard to tell. You step back into the corridor, warmed from the inside now, eyes heavy, breath slow. Somewhere above, the nobles dream under fur blankets. Somewhere below, servants twitch in their straw nests. But here, in the half-lit warmth of the kitchen, you found a kind of peace. Just as you turn to leave, the fire pops. Sparks jump. One lands on your boot, but you stomp it out with the calm of someone who's already faced pickled eels, judgmental cats, and stew mysteries tonight. The door creaks shut behind you. The kitchen sinks back into its rhythm. And you, back into the cold. The warmth doesn't last. It never does in a castle this old, this cold, this full of stone and memory. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders as you follow the flickering torchlight down another corridor. A narrow one this time. The kind that looks like it might lead nowhere. Or worse, somewhere interesting in a bad way. There's a small, arched door ahead, barely taller than you and slightly ajar. You give it a nudge. It creaks open with the tired sigh of a door that's seen too much and hasn't had a good oiling in 200 years. Beyond it, a narrow spiral stair. Again, always with the spiral stairs. You sigh and begin to climb. Or descend? No one really tells you, and honestly, it's hard to tell in the dark. But soon enough, the space opens into something different. Stone, walls, yes. But also the thick smell of dust, old wood, beeswax. And underneath that, something faintly sweet and mildly horrifying. Cheese? Feet? One of the castle's not-so-secret secrets. A passageway built into the walls, tucked away for emergencies, messages, or just the occasional eavesdrop. And judging by the half-rotted steps and cobwebs thick enough to knit a tunic, no one's come through here recently, unless it was something with more legs than you'd prefer. You press on. The corridor narrows, then widens, like the castle can't make up its mind. You pass behind what must be a chapel wall, judging by the faint chant drifting through the stone. Muffled Latin, lilting and slow. It echoes oddly through the passage, like you're inside someone's hollow memory. A rat scurries by. You pretend you didn't see it. It pretends you don't exist. Here's your official historical fact for the night. Castles often had hidden staircases and escape tunnels built into their structures. Some were practical, routes for messengers, servants, or lovers. Others were pure panic planning. If things went bad, and fast, you didn't want to be scrambling for the front gate. You pass a wooden hatch in the wall. It's latched shut, but you peek through a gap in the wood and see tapestry. The back of it. You're standing behind the great hall now, just one layer of woven unicorns away from the snoozing nobles. You consider whispering boo, but decide against it. This brings us to your fringe tidbit. Certain tapestries weren't just for decoration or insulation. They were hiding spots. Spies could press themselves flat behind them, barely breathing, listening to everything from marriage proposals to murder plots. And yes, someone probably sneezed at the wrong moment and ruined everything. Historians still argue whether these passageways were widely used or more of a novelty. Some scholars suggest they were expensive luxuries. Others think they were critical to daily castle logistics, an early medieval version of backstage access. Either way, tonight, they're yours to explore. You continue onward, the torchlight flickering across ancient graffiti carved into the stone. You pause to inspect a few. Initials, crude faces, a suspiciously well-rendered butt. One reads, Wolfred was here, which is a whole mood. Eventually, the passage slopes upward again, the ceiling lowering until you're forced to stoop. You crawl the last few feet and emerge into a small, wooden room through a low door that definitely wasn't meant for adult humans. It's dark, but you can feel shelves lining the walls. You run your fingers along the surfaces. Herbs, dried flowers, something that smells alarmingly like bad dreams in powder form. A small glass window lets in a slice of moonlight. You're in the apothecary's chamber, or at least what passes for one. Vials, pots, dried lizard tails, bundled twigs, a bowl of... is that beeswax? Or hardened porridge? Hard to say. The castle's healer, if they had one, worked here by firelight and guesswork, armed with whatever grew in the frostbitten gardens or was traded in town. You spot a shelf of labeled bottles, worm root, goosewort, and collar drops. A tiny bag says powder for dreams, tied with red string. You don't open it. You like sleeping too much to risk it. Behind a faded curtain is a small cot, just straw, a fur, and a wooden pillow that looks more like a punishment than a comfort. A mouse snuffles beneath it. Even it looks cold. And just beside the door, another passage, narrower, squeakier. You squeeze through. Suddenly you're above the chapel, the gallery where someone might sneak to observe a sermon or nap unnoticed during Mass. The stone beneath your feet hums faintly, with the chant below. You pause. Look down. The priest continues his midnight murmurs before the altar, unaware, or pretending to be, that someone's watching from above. And just beyond the chapel, you spot something else. Yet another narrow door. It's always another door. This one sticks. You shove harder, and it finally opens into a corridor so tiny, you have to turn sideways to fit. And it stinks. Sharp. Rancid. Cheese? Yes. Feet? Again, probably. But now with a hint of damp hay, you breathe through your mouth. Halfway through, A floorboard groans beneath you. Then, snap. Your foot plunges through a rotten plank and you nearly lose your balance. The noise is enough to wake something. Somewhere deeper in the wall, you hear a rustle. Not a rat. Bigger. You don't wait to find out what it is. You crawl. You scramble. You curse in 4 different centuries. And finally, gloriously, you emerge through a final door, back into the open corridor. You're back where humans belong. Sort of. You straighten your back, catch your breath, and brush off something that might be cobweb or the broken dreams of castle spies. It's quiet again. You glance back once at the door behind you. One more creaky, musty, illogical passage in a castle full of them. You made it through. You also may never find your after slipping through the castle's forgotten veins and narrowly escaping being adopted by a family of wall-dwelling mice. Your boots finally find familiar ground again. An upper corridor lit with soft torchlight. Quiet, warmish, and blissfully rat-free. You lean against the wall for a moment, catching your breath, letting your pulse slow. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls once, probably 2 a.m., or maybe 3. Time has lost all meaning. All you know is, it's late, and your legs are now legally made of boiled leather. But no rest for the historically curious. Ahead, a wooden door sits slightly ajar. You peek in. No sign of life. You step inside quietly, ducking under a low beam and into what appears to be a solar. Not a room for tanning, wrong climate, wrong century, but a warm, private retreat, a noble's daytime chamber. Yet now, it sleeps. The fire has burned low in the hearth, glowing red in the shadows. A thick, woolen tapestry covers the window, blocking out the moonlight, but also the worst of the draft. A writing desk sits by the wall, cluttered with scrolls, wax seals, and a small, half-melted candle that dribbled wax like a lazy snail. On the chair hangs a velvet robe trimmed in rabbit fur. Rich. It still smells faintly of lavender and wood smoke. And on the long, cushioned bench near the fire, a sleeping hound, gray-muzzled, curled into a dream. He doesn't stir as you pass, just lets out a deep, contented sigh through his snout. Here's your historical fact. The solar was often the most private space available to a noble family in the castle. It doubled as a sitting room, reading nook, strategy, war room, and in some cases, a place to nap where no one could demand anything from you for a blessed hour. A luxury of privacy, warmth, and dignity. 3 things rare in medieval life. You sit gently at the desk chair, careful not to disturb the scrolls. Your eye catches a letter mid-written. The ink dried halfway through a sentence. My dearest cousin, I fear the rumors are... And then, nothing. How wonderfully ominous. Near the hearth sits a small game board. Mirrors, a medieval predecessor to Nine Men's Morris. The pieces are carved bone, arranged mid-game. Someone was losing. You spot a wooden cup on the mantel and can't help but sniff it. Spiced wine. Long cold, but the scent still lingers. Honeyed, rich, and slightly medicinal. You wonder who left it here, and whether they miss it. And now, your fringe tidbit. In wealthier castles, solars sometimes held miniature libraries, collections of handwritten books, mostly religious or poetic, sometimes medical. Imagine borrowing a book and returning it 6 months later with half a sheep in thanks. Not an overdue fee you want to argue with. Historians still argue whether solars were truly private sanctuaries or simply status symbols. Some claim they were quiet escapes for contemplation and family. Others suspect they were another way for the nobility to show off embroidered cushions and how very literate they were. You know, just casually keeping a psalter near your snacks. You walk over to the tapestry by the wall. It's heavy, embroidered with a hunting scene where a boar is clearly winning. You lift it slightly and discover a thin slit in the stone, just wide enough to let in a finger of air. You touch it, freezing, but oddly calming. A creak behind you. The dog shifts, stretches, groans, and goes back to sleep. Still no barking. You might be the only person he likes tonight, or he's too tired to care. Either way, you're honored. You glance down and notice something tucked beneath the dog's paw. A carved wooden toy, shaped like a tiny knight. Chewed beyond recognition. You smile. Everyone needs a comfort object. Then something else catches your eye. A small woven basket beside the hearth, filled with thread, needles, and scraps of cloth. Someone was mending by the fire, it seems. A half-repaired glove rests on top. Coarse wool, large fingers. Probably a man's, but stitched with care. These little signs of life, of stillness, are oddly soothing. This isn't the feasting, roaring, arrow-shooting castle of legends. This is the breathing heart beneath it. The dog's snore, the forgotten wine, the paused game, the basket of repairs waiting patiently for morning. You settle near the fire, letting the warmth reach your bones. The coals shift with a soft hiss, throwing gentle sparks upward like fireflies trapped in stone. You close your eyes, just for a moment. Not to sleep, just to rest your vision, you tell yourself. But the soft ticking of the stone walls, the sighing fire, the comforting snore of the old hound, all of it wraps around you like a wool blanket, and you begin to drift, just a little, only for a moment, until a far-off clatter jolts you back, something metallic hitting stone. From the direction of the armory, you exhale slowly, reluctantly rising, because of course, the castle never truly sleeps, and now you're heading toward it. Because apparently, you're the kind of person who hears a clatter in the middle of the night and decides to investigate, rather than, say, burrow deeper into a warm blanket and pretend you heard nothing. Very brave, very foolish, very medieval. The corridor leading there grows colder with each step. It smells faintly of oiled metal, damp leather, and something like rust? Or possibly dried blood. Hard to tell in this lighting. The torches are fewer now, sputtering low on their sconces, and the silence is thick, broken only by the creak of your boots and the faint echo of something metallic being jostled. Again. You pause outside the armory door. It's ajar. Of course it is. And it swings open with a long, dramatic skrrk that would make an excellent sound effect in a ghost story. Inside, darkness, shadow, and rows of weapon racks lined like soldiers awaiting inspection. It's colder here than outside. The air feels suspended, like it hasn't moved in years. Blades hang on the walls, some gleaming, others dull. Spears lean in bunches. Shields with faded emblems peer from corners like suspicious eyes. A full suit of armor stands alone in the middle of the room, upright and gleaming faintly in the torchlight. Of course, your brain whispers, that thing is going to move. It doesn't. But still, you give it a wide berth. Here's your historical fact to keep you grounded. A castle's armory was its backbone in times of siege. It stored weapons not just for the noble family, but also for the soldiers, guards, and emergency levies. Swords, bows, crossbows, bolts, maces, axes, you name it. All oiled, maintained, and inventoried by the master-at-arms, who was basically the medieval version of your gym teacher, but with more chainmail and fewer whistles. You step between rows of racks. The shadows dance around you. Somewhere, something creaks. A harness swaying on a hook, maybe, or a bowstring contracting in the cold. On a long table rests a set of weapons clearly in mid-maintenance. A blade half cleaned, a rag stiff with oil, a whetstone. You run a finger along one of the daggers, dusty, but sharp. And there's your fringe tidbit. Some castle armories included enchanted or blessed weapons, swords rumored to glow, to whisper, to wound ghosts. Total fantasy? Probably. But when your neighbors were throwing pigs over the walls and trying to set your roof on fire, a magical dagger didn't sound like a bad idea. Historians still argue whether most weapons were practical or ceremonial. Some find ornate swords too delicate for real battle. Others argue they were used sparingly, for duels or executions. It's likely both. After all, what's the point of being nobility if your blade doesn't have an impractical jewel stuck in the pommel? You move slowly, your breath clouding in the air. Then you see it, a shield fallen off its hook. That must have been the sound you heard. You pick it up. It's heavier than expected, painted with a faded blue crest, chipped at the edges. It smells like old wood and dust. You lean it back into place. Behind you, something shifts. You freeze. A scuffling sound. Low, dragging. You turn, half expecting to see that suit of armor lunging at you. But no, it's the hound. The one from the solar. He's padded in silently, sat down behind you, and is now watching you, like this is all very amusing. Well? You whisper. Anything else I should know? He yawns, loudly, then lies down with a groan, chin resting on his paws. Apparently not. You continue exploring. In one corner of the room, a chest stands open. Inside, bolts for crossbows, coiled rope, and oddly, a tiny helmet. Child-sized. You wonder if it belonged to a page, or maybe it was a training helm, or a prank. Medieval humor leaned heavily in to hit someone with a stick and run. Beside it, a tall rack holds various polearms, halberds, glaives, bardiches, each one sounding like an evil wizard's spell, and each one more unwieldy than the last. You pick one up. Immediately regret it. Set it down gently before it breaks your back or your dignity. Over in the farthest corner, you find something unexpected. A crossbow, perfectly preserved, resting on red velvet. Not a soldier's weapon. A noble's, perhaps. A prize or a gift. Its limbs are engraved with vines and stars. The trigger is gold. It's beautiful and extremely deadly. You don't touch it. Instead, you return to the center of the room. The suit of armor still stands there, unmoving. But you take a closer look now. The visor is down. The gauntlets are empty. You tap the chest plate gently, hollow. But for a second, you swear you hear a faint clink inside. Or maybe that's just your imagination, running around like a loose chicken. You nod to the armor, just in case. Respect. You step back out into the corridor. The hound follows, tail thumping once as he trots alongside you, like he's always belonged to this midnight patrol. You glance back as the door swings shut behind you. The armory returns to its slumber, full of weapons no one hopes to use, echoes of battles that happened long before you arrived, and the lingering presence of something heavy, silent, and watching. Because even at rest, castles remember their wars. You and the old hound continue your midnight march. The corridor curves slightly, its stone floor uneven in places. the torchlight flickering off the damp walls as if the castle itself is breathing. Behind you, the armory is sealed once again, full of glinting steel and old ghosts, and ahead lies another mystery. Because every hallway in this place either leads to danger or linen. There is no middle ground. Tonight, it leads to the chapel. You notice the shift in temperature first. Cool, but not cold, like the battlements. Still, reverent. Even the dog slows, his claws ticking softly on the floor as you approach a heavy oak door carved with a faded cross. You push it open carefully, and the air greets you with a peculiar mix of wax, stone, and a faint trace of incense that still clings to the corners, like memory-made smell. The chapel isn't grand by cathedral standards, but within these fortress walls, it's a sanctuary. Tall, narrow, stained glass windows filter moonlight in slanted ribbons, painting the worn flagstone floor in faded reds, blues, and greens. A few candles still burn on the altar, dripping silently. Rows of simple wooden benches face forward, their surfaces polished smooth by centuries of anxious elbows and whispered prayers. It's quiet here, not just the absence of noise, but that thick silence that only sacred spaces know how to grow. You walk slowly between the pews, your footsteps muffled. The hound pads along beside you, his tail low, his ears tilted forward in curiosity or respect. Probably both. Even animals know when they're somewhere holy, or at least where they're not allowed to pee. Here's your historical fact. Most medieval castles had chapels, though their size and extravagance varied wildly depending on wealth and religious fervor. Services were held regularly, often daily, and nobles were expected to attend. It was less about spiritual devotion and more about social expectation. Skip a sermon, and people assumed you were plotting something, or possessed, or French. You reach the altar and pause. It's bare now, except for 2 stubby candles and a small wooden cross. You trace your fingers along the carved edge. Behind it, a faded tapestry hangs, once a brilliant depiction of St. George slaying his dragon, now more of a lumpy knight poking a disappointed lizard. But the intent still lingers. Your fringe tidbit. Some castle chapels had hidden reliquaries, secret compartments behind altars or within statues that held sacred bones, scraps of saints' robes or splinters from the true cross. These holy bits were believed to protect the castle from disease, invasion, and bad harvests. Whether they worked or not? Well, historians are still arguing. And on that note, yes, historians still debate whether these chapel rituals were sincere expressions of faith or just performative pageantry. Some believe the nobles genuinely feared divine punishment. Others suspect the chapel was just another stage for political performance. Personally, when you've lived through plague, famine, and the occasional peasant revolt, a little divine insurance feels worth it. You sit on one of the benches for a moment, letting your spine settle and your mind drift. The silence here isn't empty. It's full of old thoughts, regrets, promises, secrets whispered to saints that no one else would listen to. You glance to the side and notice a small alcove tucked into the wall. You approach. Inside it is a simple kneeler, a cushion hardened by time, and a carving of the Virgin Mary so worn with touch that her features are almost gone. But still, her shape remains. Someone has left a dried flower at her feet. Another has etched a heart into the wall beside her, clumsy but deliberate. The hound sits beside you as you kneel, more out of curiosity than conviction, You don't say anything. Just breathe. You don't have to be religious to appreciate stillness like this. The chapel asks nothing of you, except your silence. Just as you're about to leave, you hear footsteps. You stiffen, but they're slow, steady, and not coming for you. A figure appears in the doorway, a monk or priest, robed in simple gray wool, with a candle in one hand and a tired look on his face like he's been arguing with God about heating bills. He sees you, nods, doesn't speak. He walks past you, kneels at the altar, and begins to pray. You step back, quiet as snow, and let him be. The hound follows you as you retreat from the chapel, the door creaking softly as the warmth of the moment fades. But the peace lingers, and you realize something as you walk on. The castle doesn't just protect people from the world outside, it shelters memories too. Quiet ones, sacred ones, forgotten ones. Tonight, you've stepped into all of them. The hound stays with you now like he's assigned himself to your shift. No complaints. You've grown fond of the quiet company. He lopes ahead, tail swaying gently, nose twitching at every crevice, every draft, every corridor holding another secret. You follow him down a spiral stair you don't remember climbing earlier. Down, down, until the light thins, the air dampens, and the walls press a little closer. Your boots slap against colder stone, and soon the castle changes again, becoming less elegant, less grand, less about feasting and praying and more about, well, surviving. You're heading toward the lower levels, the underbelly, the cellar, not just for food and wine, though yes, also for that glorious, clinking lifeblood, but for storage, security, and secrets too large or too inconvenient to keep upstairs. Because what's a castle without at least one room that smells like wet burlap and destiny? You reach a thick wooden door, heavy iron hinges, no lock. You push it open. Inside, darkness, dust, and the scent of earth, old apples, aging wood, and, yes, wine. Very definitely wine. Barrels upon barrels line the walls, stacked 3 high, the oldest ones mottled with mold, like they've decided to retire peacefully right here. Clay jugs rest in niches. Ropes of garlic hang from nails. Someone's clearly tried to keep the vampires away, though the hound seems unconcerned. You pull a torch from the wall and step in fully. The flickering light dances across the ceiling arches and reveals shelves crammed with preserves, pears and syrup, dried plums, pickled vegetables and murky liquid. One jar contains something red that looks like it might be a heart, but probably, hopefully, isn't. Probably. Here's your historical fact. Castle cellars were critical to survival, especially in winter or during sieges. They stored dried grains, salted meats, cured fish, ale, wine, vinegar, and medicinal herbs. The deeper and cooler the cellar, the longer food could be preserved, crucial in a time when fresh wasn't always an option, and expiration dates were mostly determined by your nose. The hound sniffs a sack of onions and sneezes. You pause to inspect a row of cheeses, large wheels with names scrawled in charcoal, some cracked open and crusty, others coated in wax. A nearby crate holds root vegetables so shriveled they look like failed golems. You find a small wine tap built into the wall. Tempting. You look around. No one's watching. You twist it gently and catch a tiny splash in a wooden cup someone conveniently left there. Sip. It's warm, slightly sour, a little earthy, but not bad. Better than the stew, and definitely better than the stuff peasants drank, which included water that might kill you, and beer thick enough to chew. That brings us to your quirky tidbit. In some castles, the cellar was guarded not just by doors, but by superstition. It was believed that placing a tiny carved figure, often a grotesque face, above the door would ward off thieves and evil spirits. One such carving was known as the Wine Warden. Basically, a very judgmental goblin. You check above the door. Nothing. Either they weren't superstitious here, or someone stole the Wine Warden. Historians still argue whether cellar supplies were rationed with fairness or favoritism. Some say the steward ensured equitable shares across ranks. Others suggest the nobility took the best, the knights got the rest, and the servants, well, they got what didn't wiggle. You wander past a row of barrels labeled honeyed mead, apple vinegar, and goose fat, all the essentials. A shelf nearby holds stoneware bottles of something simply marked digestive. You don't open one. You've already had a near-death experience with pickled eels tonight. Farther in, the cellar dips lower. There's a second chamber, smaller, colder, its walls lined with stone cubbies. You kneel and peer into one. Not food this time, not wine, bones, carefully stacked, some long, some small. You blink, backing up slightly. These aren't random remains. They're arranged, honored, a family crypt. Or maybe just an ossuary for those who served the house long ago. There's no plaque, no fanfare. But someone placed dried herbs here, lavender maybe, and a single wax seal rests in the center. Broken long ago. Someone once mourned here, quietly. You stand and retreat gently, brushing dust from your cloak. The hound stays at the doorway, tail low. Even he seems to understand this is a place for reverence, not rummaging. You return to the main cellar chamber. The torchlight flickers again, shadows dancing along the barrels, giving them life, like a sleepy army waiting for like you've wandered into the castle's memory, its roots, where every jar, bone, and cask holds a story it has no mouth to tell. You press your hand to the wall, cold, rough, real. Above you, the castle sleeps. Feasts are digested, prayers are whispered, swords are hung on hooks. But down here, the castle remembers. You step out of the cellar, the door creaking shut behind you, and you carry the smell of old wine and old lives with you into the corridor. Back in the corridor again. Your boots echo more now, each step slower, heavier. Whether it's the late hour or the cellar's lingering chill wrapping itself around your spine like a damp cloak, you can't quite tell. The hound keeps beside you still, loyal, alert, yawning often. He's probably wondering, like you are, where the night ends. But the castle has one more path for you to follow. You spot a narrow stair, half hidden behind a tapestry, frayed beyond pattern. It coils downward like a snake, and you follow it, because of course you do, until the air changes once again. Moisture thickens, the stone is slick, and the light? Gone. You step carefully, hand against the wall, until the passage opens. You've arrived in the most secret and silent part of the castle, the well room, a low, cavernous chamber built into the bedrock itself. The walls glisten with condensation. Your torch flame gutters as though nervous. You move slowly, letting your eyes adjust to the wet shimmer of everything around you. In the center, a stone circle, rough-hewn, waist-high, open at the top. A wooden pulley mechanism creaks softly above it, and a frayed rope disappears into the darkness below. You peer in. The water at the bottom is invisible, too far down to see in this dim light, but you hear it. Faint ripples, a slow drip, a sense of depth that swallows sound and time. You drop a pebble in. 4 seconds later, plip. Here's your historical fact. The well was the castle's lifeline, especially during siege, when outside sources of water were cut off. A deep well built inside the castle's most secure chamber ensured water access no matter how bad things got. Many wells were hundreds of feet deep and took months, sometimes years, to dig by hand through solid rock. Imagine being that laborer. Now imagine not quitting halfway. The hound sniffs the edge of the stone ring and sneezes once, echoing like a cannon. You stifle a laugh. And your fringe tidbit? In some castles, the well chamber doubled as a secret exit, or as part of it. A hidden tunnel might begin near the well, running out under the moat or into the forest. Not for everyday use, of course. Just for the when things go very badly scenario, which, in medieval times, happened more than anyone wanted. Historians still argue whether all such tunnel rumors are true. Some archaeologists insist most were mere legend, wishful thinking. Others have found sealed passages that lead suspiciously nowhere, perhaps collapsed, or hidden on purpose. Because when you mix war, panic, and pride, you get some very creative masonry. You circle the well once, noting scratch marks on the floor where buckets scraped over and over through years of need. In the corner, a stack of empty pails leans together like sleepy dancers. One has a carved name along the rim, Edith. You wonder if that was the bucket or the person. Both possibilities feel charmingly tragic. A rusted ladle rests nearby. For tasting? Dousing fires? Threatening the bucket thieves? Hard to say. You give it a respectful nod either way. Water. So simple. So vital. So often forgotten when people talk about kings and battles and banners. But here, in the echoing dark, you feel how central it really is. How everything, the prayers, the feasts, the fights, depends on it. You sit on the stone ledge for a moment, letting the silence settle in. Drip, drip, drip. It's rhythmic, almost musical, hypnotic, like the heartbeat of the earth under the castle. The hound lies down beside you, chin resting on his paws again. You scratch behind his ears, and he leans into it without comment. Somewhere above, someone shifts in a creaky bed. Somewhere else, a log collapses in a hearth with a sigh. But down here, it's still, timeless, and very, very wet. A small alcove in the wall catches your attention as you rise. Inside it, a clay bowl, a candle stub, and something scratched into the stone above. You squint. Old Latin. Faded. You can just make out aqua et vita. Water and life. Makes sense. You look back down into the well one last time. The light from your torch shimmers faintly along the stone ring, painting wavering shadows on the floor, like ripples across memory. And then, gently, you press onward again, back toward the stairs. The hound follows, tail swishing quietly. One last glance. Drip, drip. The chamber fades behind you, and the castle keeps its oldest secret, with your boots damp and your thoughts even damper. The stairwell breathes a chill against your cheeks as you rise. Slowly now, feeling the weight of the night settle into your shoulders. The castle hasn't rushed you, but it's definitely led you. Every creaking hinge and moss-damp corridor has felt like a nudge towards something. And now, as you reach the upper floors again, you sense what might be the beginning of the end. Not of the castle. No, that beast will outlast all of us. But of your long, sleepy journey through its winter silence. At the top of the stairs, the corridor widens into something unexpected. Color. A long gallery. Rich tapestries line the walls, their threads gleaming dully in the flickering light. Reds, golds, dark forest greens, scenes of battles, hunts, and mythic beasts, their woven eyes glinting as if watching you pass. The windows here are glazed with colored glass, casting colored reflections onto the stone floor in ribbons of pale violet and amber. You walk slowly. The hound doesn't bark or bound. He just strolls beside you, head low, steps silent. You wonder if he knows these halls better than anyone. Perhaps he's seen every ghost. Or perhaps he is one. Let's not test that theory. Here's your historical fact. Long galleries were a hallmark of later medieval and early Renaissance castles, built not just as passageways, but as spaces for walking during winter, for showcasing tapestries, for hosting private conversations away from the feasting noise. These halls were social spaces in disguise, places for quiet flirtations, political whispers, and gentle exercise. A medieval treadmill, minus the gilt. You pause in front of one massive tapestry depicting a unicorn under siege by knights with lances. The unicorn does not appear impressed. You lean closer and notice someone has stitched a very small dog into the corner of the scene, clearly not part of the original plan. It even looks like your hound. You glance at him. He doesn't deny it. Your fringe tidbit. Some castles commissioned joke tapestries. Subtle, woven satirical scenes mocking political rivals or depicting comically exaggerated courtly tales. One such piece is rumored to have featured a knight slipping on goose droppings in full armor. Tragically, it was lost to mildew. Justice for the goose. Historians still argue whether these tapestries were made solely for insulation or also served propaganda purposes. Sure, they helped trap heat, but they also showed wealth, control, and artistic influence. 100 peasants starving outside, and meanwhile, you're in here lounging under silk threads depicting you slaying a 10-headed dragon while wearing very flattering leggings. At the far end of the gallery, a small table rests beneath a window. On it, a lute, slightly out of tune, a half-written love letter, an ink bottle sealed with a plug of wax, and one dried rose, flattened between sheets of parchment, forgotten. The handwriting on the letter is elegant, but rushed. To my heart, if you ever read this, and then, just a blot. You don't finish it. Some stories are better left unresolved. You sit for a moment on the bench beneath the window, letting the colored glass bathe you in soft hues. Outside, the snow continues its quiet descent, thick now, like flowers sifted across the landscape. The rooftops are dusted white. The trees beyond the walls are nearly invisible in the dark, but you can feel them, tall, ancient, unmoving. The castle is a warm island in a frozen sea. The hound rests his head on your knee. You stroke his ears. He sighs. You both stare out into the snow for a while, not needing anything more than the quiet. Then the silence breaks, softly. Music, faint, almost imaginary. A lute string plucked somewhere distant. A voice humming, low, steady, feminine. You can't place the tune. It doesn't sound like a song for court or feast. It sounds like someone soothing a baby, or themselves. You rise gently and follow the sound. Down another corridor, the light thins. The warmth fades. You find a narrow wooden door, barely cracked open. Inside, a small room. A chambermaid's, perhaps. The fire has long since died, but the embers still glow faintly. A woman sits at the window, back turned, brushing her hair slowly, singing to herself. She doesn't look up. You don't enter. You just watch for a moment, silent, unseen. Then, with a whisper of fabric, you turn and walk away. The gallery welcomes you back, its colors softer now, gentler in their fading. You feel the weight of time here, not in centuries, but in moments. Every quiet breath taken beside a window, every secret shared under a tapestry, every footstep echoing into memory. You've passed through the castle's public face, its halls of power and piety. But here, in this in-between space, you've brushed up against it, and the castle narrows again, not in size, but in presence. The hush deepens, like the walls are holding their breath. You and the hound move through another small door, one carved plainly, its wood lighter, less polished than the rest. A servant's wing, perhaps. And as you enter, the air shifts once more, not cold, but lived in, smelling faintly of beeswax, herbs, and something yeasty and warm. You're in the castle's heart now, in the place that makes everything else possible, but never gets, to stand in candlelight at a feast. You found the servant quarters. The corridor is low-ceilinged and tight, with doors on either side, small wooden ones with iron latches, none of them ornate. Some stand slightly ajar, revealing dim rooms with straw mattresses, worn shoes neatly lined against the wall, and personal items tucked into corners. A carved comb, a small pouch, a wooden doll with one eye rubbed away. You move slowly, respectfully. These are the castle's ghosts, not the haunted kind, but the forgotten kind. The cooks, the maids, the washerwomen, the grooms, the footmen, the lads who lit the fires, and the girls who emptied the chamber pots. People who made the nobility sparkle, but barely got a mention in anyone's ledger. You pass a small chamber with 5 low beds arranged neatly side by side. 4 are occupied, snoring softly under threadbare blankets. The 5th holds only a bundle of herbs, tied with red thread. Whether it's a good luck charm or a subtle warning, you're not entirely sure. The hound pauses, sniffs the air, then continues. Apparently, nothing to be alarmed about. Here's your historical fact. Large castles employed anywhere from 50 to 200 servants, depending on the wealth and size of the estate. These workers were divided into precise hierarchies: head cooks, undercooks, potboys, scullery maids, laundresses, spit turners, messengers, stable hands, and more. Life was grueling, the hours long, and the pay barely worth writing about. But for many, it was safer than the outside world. You duck under a beam that clearly wasn't designed for anyone taller than 5'7". This entire part of the castle seems compressed, like it was built by someone trying to save space and money. The walls are bare. The light is minimal. But you notice something telling. A line of wooden pegs hammered into the wall, each one holding a single item: a cloak, a bonnet, a set of clogs, a leather belt. All uniform, all cared for, all ready for morning. Your fringe tidbit? Some castles had rules of silence in the servant quarters after nightfall. No talking was allowed except in emergencies. Some enforced it harshly. Others simply trusted that exhaustion would do the job. Either way, the only voices here now are the ones sleeping. You continue down the corridor and find a small alcove with a cracked basin and a lump of soap shaped vaguely like a toad. Someone has washed here recently. A smear of wet cloth hangs nearby, dripping quietly. The smell of rosemary lingers in the stone, like someone scrubbed it into the walls to keep sickness at bay. Historians still argue whether servant life in castles was better or worse than village peasantry. Some argue the guaranteed meals and protection made it a prize position. Others point to the endless labor, invisible status, and frequent abuse from higher-ups. Probably both are true, depending on who you ask, and when you ask them. You step into a larger chamber now, a sort of communal room perhaps. A long table sits in the center, littered with scraps, bits of bread, a half-mended sock, a bent spoon. Beside it, a fire burns low. A kettle of something gloopy and brown bubbles gently over it. You don't ask. You absolutely don't taste. Beside the hearth, a young boy sleeps curled on a pile of cloth sacks. He hugs one like it's a favorite bear. A small chalkboard lies near his hand, covered in scratchy letters. Practice writing, perhaps. Or a message to someone he can't say things to aloud. You stare at it for a moment, then quietly cover it with a rag so it doesn't smudge. The hound noses a pile of boots by the wall. One of them must belong to him, or someone he once loved. He gives a soft huff, then lays down with a thunk that somehow sounds respectful. You sit for a while on a low stool, watching the fire and listening to the deep, layered quiet. And then, you spot it. On the far wall, a small painting. Very small, crude, done in chalk and charcoal. A woman's face, round and kind, surrounded by little figures. Children, maybe. One has a mop of curls. Another has... Is that a sword? It's definitely not fine art, but it's real. Someone made this to remember, or to hope. It stays with you as you leave. You pass one last door, slightly open, and peek inside. Just a cot, a coat, a pair of calloused feet poking out from under the blanket. You don't enter. You simply nod, as if to thank the room. Into the castle again. Its quiet machinery still ticking behind velvet, behind feast, behind flame. Because without these rooms, these people, none of the rest would exist. You leave the servant quarters behind, stepping back into a corridor that somehow feels taller, colder, and emptier, without the quiet weight of sleeping bodies and whispered chores. The castle tightens its grip again, not unkindly, but certainly with more posture. Your hound stretches and yawns behind you, as if to say, "Onward, then," and you follow. A soft draft snakes around your legs. It carries a scent that's unfamiliar, sharp, mineral, almost metallic, and you hear it too. A rhythmic clang, pause, clang. Not violent, not alarming, just steady. Curious, you follow the sound, winding past thick stone arches and down one last stair, a short one this time, until you reach a low, barrel-vaulted chamber, warm and glowing from the heat of a coal brazier at its center. You've found the forge, or more accurately, the castle's blacksmithing room. The clanging comes from a bent old man hunched over an anvil, hammering rhythmically at what looks like a horseshoe. Sparks fly in slow bursts. He doesn't look up as you enter, just keeps working. The hound pads in and lies down as if he's been here many times before. The air here is rich with heat, ash, and iron. Your boots crunch slightly over coal dust as you walk further in. Racks of tools line the walls, tongs, hammers, files, and hooks in every shape imaginable. Horseshoes hang in tidy rows. Sword blanks rest beside them, glowing faintly orange. A small crucible bubbles in the corner, heating something that smells strangely sweet. Probably not candy. Here's your historical fact. Blacksmiths were indispensable to castle life. They made not only weapons and armor, but also nails, hinges, locks, horseshoes, kitchen tools, gates, and even medical tools. A castle without a smith was like a knight without a belt, loud, disorganized, and constantly falling apart. The smith grunts softly and finally pauses. He dunks the horseshoe into a nearby barrel of water. Shh. A cloud of steam hisses upward. He leans on his hammer and looks at you. Just a glance. No words. Then he turns, dips a finger into a pot of black grease, and begins coating a chainmail shirt with it, like he's buttering toast. You feel like a ghost, but that's okay. This is his world, not yours. Your quirky tidbit? Medieval blacksmiths often gave their forges names, as if the place itself was alive. Some called it the Red Dragon, others the Singing Hole. One famously referred to his as Mistress Elspeth, which historians assume was a metaphor, though honestly, we can't be sure. Forged life was lonely. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths held high status within castle hierarchy or remained just above common laborers. Some evidence shows they were trusted, respected, even feared a little. No one wants to anger the guy holding molten iron. Others lived in poverty, paid only in food, lodging, and the occasional bartered shoe. You move to a nearby workbench. On it sits a nearly finished blade. No decoration, pure function, balanced, brutal, effective. You resist the urge to touch it. Even your curiosity knows boundaries. Beside it, a dagger with a broken tip. You wonder whose story ended with that snap. A shelf above holds molds, rough stone and clay, used to cast buckles, rings, and medallions. A tiny pile of discarded ones lies beside the bench, all malformed. One looks like a face that melted halfway through prayer. You hope it wasn't a commission. Then, in the corner, you spot something lovely. A delicate circlet of iron. No jewels, no polish. Just twisted, blackened metal forming a vine pattern, like it was once meant for a woodland queen who didn't care for crowns. It's resting on a velvet cloth, clearly not trash. A gift for someone, or maybe a memory of someone gone. The smith sighs again. His fire crackles, and the hound lets out a soft, rumbling snore. You sit for a moment on an overturned bucket, letting the heat reach your face. The room is warm, the air is heavy, but your eyelids, not so heavy yet. You glance toward a wooden board above the forge. Something is scratched into it with a hot poker. Make it last, or don't make it at all. You smile, not a bad motto for a blacksmith, or a life. As you rise, the smith has already returned to his hammering. The sound picks up again, one beat at a time. Clang, clang, clang. You slip out quietly. The hound follows without being called, and the forge door closes gently behind you. The castle, once again, wraps you in cool stone and quiet steps. But now, you carry with you the sound of metal meeting metal, of sparks rising like fireflies, and of one man in a room full of fire, shaping the bones of the heavier. Like even time itself is wrapped in a woolen cloak and nodding off by the hearth. You climb slowly, each step echoing a little softer than before. The castle feels different now. Not haunted, just drowsy, as if it's been watching you this whole time, and is finally satisfied that you're not here to steal the silverware or wake the Lord. The hound stays close. His steps match yours. No more bounding or sniffing, just a quiet, shared tiredness. You reach the uppermost level again, where the air grows still and the torches burn lower. Up ahead, a door stands open. and warm light spills from within like a slow sigh. You step inside, instinctively quieter, and immediately feel it. You're in the Lord's solar again. But this time, it's empty. Not in a cold, abandoned way, more like a room that's just been left a moment ago. A book rests open on the cushioned bench by the fire. A goblet, half full, sits on a nearby table. A fur cloak is draped over the arm of a chair, like someone just shrugged it off to nap. The fire crackles softly, its embers glowing deep red, flickering like breathing. You cross the room slowly. The windows are iced around the edges, and beyond them, the snowfall continues. Steady, quiet, endless. It's buried the courtyard now, smoothed it into a single white blanket. The trees beyond the wall are just shadows. The sky above them glows faintly purple, like even the moon is tired. You settle into a deep, velvet-lined chair by the fire. The hound flops beside it and exhales one last time like a bellows going out. Here's your historical fact. The solar was a private chamber in most castles, usually for the lord or lady to retreat from the public eye. It was warmer than the Great Hall, with better windows, personal furniture, and softer touches. Books, embroidery, family keepsakes. You're sitting now in what was once the height of medieval luxury. No draft, no chores, just quiet and firelight. Your quirky tidbit? Some solars included a small hidden hatch or peephole into the Great Hall, so the Lord could eavesdrop on guests or even spy on the servants during feasts. Castle gossip was a very serious currency. Some lords knew more from listening than speaking. And yes, historians still argue whether solars were truly personal sanctuaries or just carefully constructed facades. Was the Lord relaxing here, or conducting shadow politics behind a cozy curtain? The answer probably depends on whether you've just lost your lands to him. You lean your head back against the velvet. It smells of wood smoke and lavender. Your muscles ease. The fire crackles softly. The hound twitches in his sleep, chasing something invisible but, you hope, harmless. Your eyes trace the shelves nearby, filled with scrolls, not all of them intact. A tiny carved box with a broken latch. A chessboard with only one knight piece missing. A jar labeled juniper salve, do not eat. Clearly the result of a very specific incident. Above the hearth, a painting. A woman in a deep red gown, unsmiling. Beside her, a man with a sword and a look like he could outstare stone. Neither looks pleased to be painted. You wonder if they ever sat in this very chair, staring at these same embers. Probably. And probably wondering who would sit here next. You let your eyes drift down to the rug, worn, thick, hand-woven. A tiny flower pattern barely visible anymore. Someone made this, knot by knot, knowing it would be trampled, and they did it anyway. That thought stays with you. There's nothing to chase now, no doors to open, no shadows to investigate, just this chair, this fire, this breath, and the castle, still here, still holding the night. You close your eyes. The room hums around you, and now, as the castle settles into its deepest hush, so do you. The fire dips lower, each flame curling like a sleepy hand drawing down a curtain. The wind outside whispers across stone and snow, brushing against windows like a lullaby hummed by the sky itself. Your breath slows, your limbs loosen. Even the hound beside you, your quiet companion through it all, has melted into the rug, his tail still, his dreams soft and unbothered. In the quiet, you can almost feel the heartbeat of the place beneath you. Ancient, patient, It has stood here for hundreds of winters, seen the rise and fall of names, the coming and going of kings, the footsteps of thousands, some running, some creeping, some, like you, simply walking through the night. And now, as the castle folds itself into rest once more, you become part of it, just another breath in its long, endless sleep. So let go now. Let the walls fade. Let the snow keep falling. You're warm. You're safe. You're home. If only for tonight. Sleep, traveler. The castle will keep watch.